Today we're going to do a viewer Q&A episode where I answer questions about my gear, about light, my editing workflow, my workshops, my favorite photo of the year, and what the weirdest thing is I carry in my camera bag. So a little over a week and a half ago, I put out the call for questions for a viewer Q&A episode, which is what today's video is going to be about. And I did get several questions from various people across various platforms, either via DMs, comments, or emails. And I thought we'd take some time, pull some of those favorite questions out, and we're going to answer them during this video. The questions range from topics about gear, about light, and about my editing workflow, a little bit about my workshops, what my favorite image was this year, and finally something a little fun about what's the weirdest thing in my camera bag. So let's dive in. Let's answer these questions. Okay, so the first question comes from Mark T, who asks, if you had to start over with just one camera and two lenses, what would you pick and why? And this is a sort of an interesting question because anyone that watched my camera bag tour last week, you know I default to having 3 lenses with me. So I'm sort of being asked to limit what would I do if I was just doing 2 lenses and what camera body would I go with. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit and I'm actually going to answer with 2 options. I'm going to do an option 1 and what option 1 is all about, and then I'm going to answer with an option 2 and what option 2 is all about. Let's start with option 1. So option 1 is if I was buying with intent not to have to repurchase anything, what would I go with? What would I do? And that's pretty easy. I think anyone can guess the camera body I would go with would be a Nikon Z7 II. I've done numerous videos on this camera body, and most people know that I think it is really the strongest landscape photography lens that Nikon has. If you're just doing landscape photography, you start doing other things where autofocus starts to become even more important, then there's some room for variation here as Z8 starts to look attractive or some other newer cameras. But for landscape photography, I get 45 megapixels in this camera. I've talked lots about this camera. It's just a really strong choice, and it's the core of my start. It's the camera body I would go with. Now for lenses, again, talking about it here, I wouldn't want to repurchase anything. This is me sort of building my collection, working towards my ultimate lens collection by starting with just 2 lenses. And that is, I would do the Nikon 24-120. It is a great mid-range zoom. The image quality is good. It's very versatile and gives me a nice broad focal length to work with, from 24 millimeters to 120 millimeters. And then because I'm pairing it with a Nikon Z7 II with a higher megapixel, I can sort of cheat out that 120 millimeter to a little further by more aggressive cropping. I've got the pixels to crop, so I'm able to sort of cheat that 120 millimeter focal length a little more. So that would be one of the first lenses I would get, would be 24-120. I think even if you want to go with one lens, and if you're going for the quality aspect of things, you can't really go wrong with this 24-120. It's very versatile, gives you options, and it really is a great start to landscape photography, I think, in that regards. The second lens would be the Nikon 100-400 millimeter lens. I've done videos on this particular lens. I'm really enamored with it. I think it's a great lens, high image quality. It does work with a teleconverter, so in the future, if I wanted to add, say, the 1.4x teleconverter, I could. Just a really great lens. And this would give me 24 millimeters to 400 millimeters and a very high quality setup that I really wouldn't feel much pressure to replace these lenses. So if I continue to grow or I continue to want these lenses to serve me for a long time, I don't need to go repurchase. Now it's important because the 24-120 is a little over $1,000, $1,200. I don't have the number right in front of me. I'll put it up on the screen. Now the 100-400 millimeter lens from Nikon, it's an expensive lens. It's up there. Again, I'll put its price on the screen here, but this is not a budget setup by any means. The camera body's not too bad now because it's an older camera body now, so the price is starting to drop. But the lenses, these are sort of set up for long-term use. But that's what I would go with in option 1, where I didn't really want to repurchase anything. And that takes me to option number 2, which I'm going to frame more in a budget but capable genre of camera body and lenses. And I'm actually going to stick with the Nikon Z7 II for the camera body. Again, like I said in option 1, it's just a really strong camera body, and because it is getting to be an older camera model for Nikon, it has started to come down in price. So you can usually get a pretty good deal for it, and if you're a landscape photographer, it's just super hard to go wrong with that. So the Nikon Z7 II even makes it into my budget approach. But lens-wise, I switch it up just a little bit. If we're trying to stay on a budget but have a lot of range and a lot of versatility, I'm going to switch up and we're going to do a 14-30 on the wide side. Now this isn't exactly a budget lens. This is more contributes to the getting me lots of focal length. But it's a 14-30 millimeter lens. I've talked about it before. I like it. It's small, compact, uses a pretty normal standard filter size here, 82 millimeter, so nice and flexible. And then I would pair it with the Nikon 28-400 millimeter lens. Now this is a a little bit slower lens. It's an f4 to f8 variable aperture lens. So you're going to tend to need to use this on a tripod for some of your landscape photography, which isn't a big deal for landscape photographers. Could be a big deal if you're dealing with fast moving objects and things like that, because you're going to be getting out to the f8 pretty early. It does have VR, so that helps. I've done handheld work with it. Paired with the Z7 II, it works out pretty great. But between these two lenses, this gets me a 14mm to 400mm setup for the price of two lenses. This lens is a little over $1,000, $1,100 bucks, something like that. Again, I'll put the price up on the screen. But compared to the Nikon 100 to 400mm, it's a much less expensive option and gets me right into a really big range of focal lengths right off the bat. I call this my budget. Again, you know, this isn't inexpensive per se. It's not my budget option, but we're talking about if I were coming back to it and trying to be a somewhat conservative, this is the setup I would go with. But I do note that this lens could potentially want to be replaced at some point with the 24 to 120. And then if you go to my standard carry that I talked about in my camera bag tour video, the 100 to 400. So this one, I still keep it. If I'm doing a trip or I'm really trying to keep my load down, this 28-400 is really useful because it does have that broad focal length range. But I could see a person wanting to replace it in the longer view picture of things when it comes to your landscape photography. But that's what I'd go with. Nikon Z7 II, the body in both choices. 24 to 120 and a 100 to 400 in the one option where I really don't want to have to rebuy a lens or feel like I need to upgrade a lens. And if I was going a little more budget but wanted a lot more focal length, the 14 to 30 and the 28 to 400mm. Thanks for the question, Mark. Okay, next question comes from Kristen S., who asks, how do I deal with light that just isn't cooperating? Maybe I've had this scene in mind and the light just isn't working out. And I think that's a great question because as landscape photographers, we run into this all the time. We don't get to control the light. We can show up at a certain place at a certain time and the light just doesn't work out. So I think this is a very common occurrence and one we have to deal with. And there's a couple answers to this. One is you can be patient. If it's a situation of just you need the sun to get a little higher in the sky, a little lower in the sky, or maybe even just wait for a cloud to come through to give you that slightly softer light that you're looking for that particular scene. And sometimes just sitting there and waiting is what you need to do. And I've done that before. You sit down, just relax. Enjoy the outdoors, enjoy the air on your face, enjoy the wind, enjoy the scene that's unfolding. Even though it might not be making for a great picture right now, it's probably still very pleasing just to be there out in nature. And this is where I think enjoying the process of landscape photography is so important because it makes that waiting, it makes that being patient even easier because you just enjoy being out. If you get the picture, great. If you don't get the picture, you've still had a great day out. So be patient is one rule. But sometimes the scene is going to change if you're patient. For example, a sunrise. If the conditions aren't right for a sunrise, even if you wait for those conditions to change, well, the sun's going to be too high in the sky to be a sunrise. You're going to move into mid-morning, late morning, and it's going to be a completely different scene and not the shot you're after. And this has happened to me when I went to Grandview in West Virginia, the New River Gorge area. I made a big drive. I think I drove a little over an hour to get there for sunrise. Had gotten up super crazy early. And when I got there, it was fogged in. I mean, it was, you couldn't see in front. You couldn't even see down to the river at all. It wasn't just overcast. It was fogged in. You could not see. And I did wait for a little bit. I thought, well, maybe it'll lift up or maybe the sun just starts to come up will start to push through that fog and give me some cool conditions. So I waited a little bit, following my be patient advice, enjoyed sitting on a bench where I was at and just enjoying. You could hear the sounds and it was sort of neat. But eventually get to the point, even if this fog burns off, it is no longer going to be sunrise. The sun is going to be super high in the sky, and it's just not going to work out. So when I realized that, I just shifted what I was going to take a picture of. I was sitting there, and I was like, you know, I would kill for some fog like this back home. Why don't I go take some pictures in this fog while I wait? And that's what I did. I loaded up my bag and I went back into the woods and I went back to another little parking area where I thought it would be real conducive to the fog being there. And I wandered around camera in hand for probably an hour plus that morning, taking pictures in the fog and embracing the fog photos, even though what I went there for was a sunrise photo. So in those situations where the light isn't working out, like I said, I recommend being patient. Sometimes that'll work. The scene will be there when it moves. If it's a more time-sensitive scene like a sunrise, sunset, where being patient means you're going to not get the shot that you were actually there for, just shift focus. Shift what you're there for. Look around. What else is going on? Are there other scenes you can photograph? And just start photographing those and try to walk away with something that's interesting. Like I said, that morning at Grandview when it was foggy, I sat there longer than I cared to admit before I realized, you know, I would love to shoot fog any other time. Why don't I go do that now? So be flexible, be patient, and you can make even light that's not cooperating with the shot you had in mind work out for you. So Brian C is asking what my current workflow is in Lightroom. And I've done several Lightroom videos over the years. I've done some that show sort of my whole standard process through Lightroom, though that video is getting a little dated now. I've done videos on specific techniques I use in Lightroom, and most recently I did a video on the Rethink Landscape Toolkit from David Kingham that I've started to work into my workflow. And that's what I'm really using a lot in my workflow. It's been the biggest single adjustment to my Lightroom workflow that I've had. And if you missed that video, I'll link to it down in the description below. But the Rethink Toolkit from David Kingham is essentially two things in one. It's a structured workflow. He organizes the tools in a step-by-step workflow, steps 1 through 7, and you start and you work your way through it. And that includes prepping your core file, getting your tones adjusted correctly, your color adjusted correctly, your detail adjusted correctly, getting some more targeted adjustments in, and then wrapping up with any other little effects or things like that that you want to do. And he does that all through a set of presets. But these aren't one-click presets. These are presets that do very specific tasks. For example, they are dodging presets that are set up to dodge maybe highlights or midtones or shadows. Burn presets that can burn highlights, midtones, or shadows. And they're just a very powerful way of making things you can already do in Lightroom more efficient. He's not doing the work for you. He's giving you a tool to make it easier to do the work. And he structures it all in this workflow, this 7-step workflow, so that you're working through the file consistently. As Lightroom's gotten more advanced with its generative AI tools and masking tools, it has started to come to the point where you do need to work through certain things in a certain order in order to be more efficient. And his toolkit, the Rethink Landscape Toolkit, structures it that way. It sort of walks you through. You don't have to do every single step, but they're in there as mental reminders to do it. I got access to this toolkit, and I've sort of lost track now. I feel like it's been 2 months, 3 months ago. I got it shortly after he released it. And I've integrated it into my Lightroom workflow for nearly every single landscape photo I edit. And I've just found it immensely helpful to have that structured workflow, as well as just the tools in the toolkit are just things that I knew how to do or know how to do, but sometimes I get lazy and I don't want to go in and build that mask just to target this and then do this in order to get what I want. Instead, here it's a one-click, boom, I've got a dodge highlights thing so I can bring some highlights out, or maybe highlights are too bright somewhere. I've got this burn highlights I can do. It's got a lot of contrast presets in it, mid-tone contrast. It's got a preset in there for that. And I can adjust all of these, the strength. I can apply it and adjust it. The structured workflow has sort of setting the base image. It has you decide whether your image is low dynamic range or high dynamic range, and then how much contrast do you want in that to sort of give you a nice base image to do these additional steps through. So I've just been really impressed with the Rethink Landscape Toolkit. That I use it all the time. I found it super helpful. If you're used to using Photoshop and you're used to some of the panels that are available for it, like TK Panel is one that jumps to mind. Lots of people use TK Panel inside their Photoshop work because it made luminosity masking so easy. It was just a few clicks and you could get exactly what you want. This Rethink Toolkit is very similar to that, except for Lightroom, and maximizes the usage of Lightroom. And like I said, been super impressed. If you're interested in hearing more about that, I do have a video on it. Like I said, I'll link to it down in the description below. And I've considered doing like a live edit webinar thing with the Rethink Toolkit. If you're interested in seeing that, drop a comment down below, because if there is interest, I'll consider doing a live webinar. But I can't speak highly enough of this toolkit, and so I'm happy to try to showcase it, show it off, answer some questions that I can answer if you're on the fence about picking this toolkit up. So, but yep, Rethink Landscape Toolkit, it's the biggest change to my Lightroom workflow. So Laura M asks, what's my favorite workshop location? So this one I'll be a little careful with. First, if I'm leading a workshop in an area, it's an area I think is awesome, amazing, and brings lots of opportunity to landscape photographers working to practice their craft. I don't lead workshops in areas where I'm not excited about. I'm excited about all the areas I lead workshops in: Death Valley, Smoky Mountains, my local Hocking Hills, West Virginia, all of them. I only lead workshops in areas where I feel creative and energetic to do so. So just because I'm going to sort of choose a favorite here doesn't mean that the other workshops aren't any good. They're equally as fun, and they're lots of fun. But the one I think surprises most people is the West Virginia workshop. And I love to watch attendees' faces as I take them to these different places and they get to see and experience this area that a lot of people really don't know very well. I lead in the Davis-Thomas area of West Virginia. It's been my longest running multi-day workshop, and I love to take people there. You get a whole variety of things. You get waterfalls of all sorts of different nature. You get overlooks. You get high mountain valleys. And it's just really a great experience. And because so much of this is not as well known, people show up and they're just always impressed with the scenes we take them to. So it's my favorite. And the other part I really like about this, and it always works really well for this workshop, is the way I have it structured is, we meet and we do our thing. We do a really amazing overlook, which everyone always likes and thinks is great and super happy with. We do that on the first night. The next day is sort of a waterfall day. We do a lot of waterfalls in the morning. We do a little Q&A or image review or editing in the middle of the day. And then we do more waterfalls at night with an easy sunset in the evening. And then by this point, they've felt like they've seen the overlooks, they've seen the waterfalls, and they've driven around, and they're feeling like they understand West Virginia. They think they've got this pretty much figured out, and they're feeling pretty good about it. But the next day, I take them up to this location that's up this winding forest road, and we're going up there for sunrise. So we're going up this forest road in the dark, which for a lot of people, they're not necessarily used to being on forest roads, much less at night, and winding your way up this big mountain. And then we get up to this location. It's dark. We're wearing headlamps. I have to warn them, be careful. There's big cliffs over here. We got to, be careful, stick with me, follow my steps. And we get to the spot where I like to set up, and it's dark. And they really can't see what's going to happen. They don't even know for sure where the sun's coming up beyond me pointing in the dark. It's going to come up over that direction. And then the sun comes up and they find themselves in this extremely unique landscape environment, West Virginia. Because of the elevations it's at and how the wind blows, it feels more like a place in northern Canada than it does in West Virginia. But it's a complete shock to them because it's not a waterfall. It's completely different than any of the overlooks. And like I said, it's just a really great time to be there with people and they get to experience it. Some of it's because I've been leading workshops in West Virginia the longest of any of the locations I've been leading, so I'm sure it's got a certain fondness for me because of that. But if there's one of my favorite locations to run is my West Virginia one, and I am actually going to be running it twice next year. Recently, I've only been running a fall trip in West Virginia, and coming up in 2026, I'm going to run a spring trip, and it's been probably 2 or 3 years, 3 years since I've done a spring workshop there. But we're going to do a spring West Virginia trip, and I'll keep my fall one as well. But if you're interested in the West Virginia trip, you've got 2 opportunities, a spring one and a fall one. And I'd love to see you there. It's just a really great area, and I'd love to share it with you. Okay, next question is, what photo am I most proud of from the past year? And this question is from Eric J. That's a good question. And I do appreciate the fact he said within the past year, because I find my favorite photos change over time, of course. I mean, now I have some that hold a special place, but I feel like even as my skills as a landscape photographer improve, or I visit new places, or I finally revisit a place and get some conditions that I'm super enthusiastic about, my favorite photos can morph and change over time. So I really like the fact he said within the past year. And that brings me to what my current favorite photo is. And I just got this one this past fall. So it isn't a super old photo by any means. In fact, it's probably only 6 weeks old, but it has quickly come to the top of my list as one of my favorite photos. And I actually haven't shared this photo much on social media yet because I don't know, I'm sort of sitting on it and letting it marinate, but I have it set as my desktop background on my laptop, and so I get to see it every day, and I'm just super happy with it. And that photo was taken in West Virginia at Bear Rock Preserve, and I've got other photos of this location out there. I've taken photos of this place many times. I've got lots of stories from this particular location. Maybe that's why this is one of my favorite photos, is because I have so much history with this spot, and how many times I've been out there and either gotten light that just doesn't work out, and photos I'll probably never share, to stories of when we got a 10-minute gap from the wind, rain, fog, and got just a pretty awesome sunrise. Well, on this particular trip, I'd actually gone out and camped the night before in one of the wilderness areas up there, and that was so I could be 10 minutes away from the spot. So many times in the workshop, I'm out there and I'm helping people get the photo. And I don't really get to do a lot of my own photography at this spot anymore because I'm helping the people I'm with. And sunrise moves really, really fast. And so it's important to help them make sure they get the shot, because sunrise is going to go from start to finish way quicker than you would think. Anyways, I made a special point on this trip to go sort of scout it out and to have some time to just be me up there. And on this particular time, I was up there. Wasn't sure how the clouds would go, but they cooperated more than I thought they would. I got out there nice and early, sat there in the dark, waiting for it, just me. It was nice, quiet, and I wasn't sure how sunrise was going to be, but it worked out just perfect. Got this nice soft light, had this nice glow to it, and when I got the pictures home and edited them, it was one of those edits that just worked right? Like sometimes you get an image and you felt like the conditions were good, but the edit's just not really working. In this particular case, it sort of all came together. I got a good scene, the edit came together, and it quickly came to the top of my list of favorite photos. So right now it's hanging out there, right up there at the top. Like I said, really haven't even shared it much on social media because I'm just sort of sitting on it, enjoying it, and I'll share it when the time is right. You're sort of getting to see it for one of the early times right here in this video. So I hope you enjoy it, but this is within the past year, probably one of my favorite images. Okay, last question comes from Diane R, who asked, what's the weirdest thing I carry in my camera bag? And we just did the camera bag review last week, right? So this may or may not come as a surprise, but let me show you probably what I would consider the weirdest thing I have, in this particular case, on my camera bag back here. And that's this guy right here. So let's talk just a little bit about this. So this is a Buc-ee's mascot that sits in my bag. And I did talk about him a little bit in my camera bag tour from last week, which I'll link to down in the description below. But my wife crochets various things, and she'll make me these little crochet charms. And I have them on different camera bags. I have a wolf. I have a Baby Yoda. I just have various ones. And I think it's cool. Some cases, back from my portrait event days, I used to have two camera bags that looked very much the same. So the charms help me know which camera bag was which. And I've just carried that over into my landscape photography. It's just, I don't know, sort of a good luck charm or just something a little unique if I'm out and a conversation starter or something like that. But this bag used to have a wolf on it. That's what it had. But now it's got a Buc-ee's charm on it. So my buddy Caleb McKinney, I met him in Smoky Mountains a little over a year ago. And, you know, he's pretty excited about Buc-ee's and the gas station supermart store. And I was like, oh, you know, I drove by one of those on the way here. And he goes, oh, well, you got to stop. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll stop. So I stopped off at one, and I guess these people have really good food, but when I'm on the road, I'm a stop and go. I like to stop, get my gas, hit the restroom, and go. I don't like to spend a whole lot of time there. And it was crowded. There was people everywhere. I mean, it was crazy crowded. There's lines for the food. But anyway, so I'm in there, and I'm like, okay, I'm not getting food. I just want to get my Diet Dr. Pepper and go. So I go over to the coolers, and they don't have Diet Dr. Pepper. And I'm like, what? No Diet Dr. Pepper. I guess they don't sell it there. At least I couldn't find it when I was there. So anyways, the whole Buc-ee's experience, I stopped by and I can see it. I get it. It's an interesting experience, but it's just not really my thing. So anyways, I told my family about that. And on one of the subsequent Smoky Mountain trips I did, I had my family with me. And I was like, you know, I sort of got to show you guys this because it's just, you got to see it. So we went in, showed my family, and, you know, they got it. They thought it was fun and you know, enjoyed the trip for what it was, like seeing this Buc-ee's experience. I think you do sort of have to check it off your list. But it is not my favorite place to stop. In fact, I actively avoid stopping at it when I'm doing that Smoky Mountain trip because I'd rather not deal with the crowd or anything like that. I'll go find a Love's truck stop first. But anyways, when we were there, my wife bought this Buc-ee's charm, and it's been on my bag ever since. It's just, I think it's funny, you know, this brings together, you know, Caleb, hey, go check out Buc-ee's, to my family visit there, and just the whole thing. So this is probably the weirdest thing I carry. Most of my stuff in here is photography related, nothing really weird, but this little charm I carry on there probably has the weirdest little story around it, especially since I'm not even really a big fan of Buc-ee's, but here it is. So great question, Diane. So that's the viewer Q&A this time around. I thank everybody that shared a question with me through DMs or through email or anything like that. I appreciate it. I have my video topic list and things I want to talk about, but I just assume talk about things that folks are curious about, what they want to hear. And I think these viewer Q&As, I try not to do a ton of them, but I think they're interesting and can be fun to do. So if you have any questions or anything like that, drop them in the comments below. Maybe it'll even make it into a full-length video because it's something that I think would warrant a full-length video to talk about. Again, thanks for joining me. Thanks for questions that were sent in. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to see future landscape photography content from me, including tips, tricks, behind the scenes, and little viewer Q&As like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you for watching.